RFK Jr.'s MAHA report drew a wide array of criticism. If you watch Blaze News Mandate, you know that many of the flack was actually financed by corporations. So here to explain Big Pharma's stranglehold on Capitol Hill is J.D. Hayworth. He's the former House Ways and Means Committee chairman, and he's the spokesperson for Pharmaceutical Reform Alliance. So J.D., thanks so much for joining us here on the show tonight.
Jill, it's great to be with you and Matt. One friendly amendment. As much as I wished I had been the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, I was a senior member by the time I left, but departed before I was able to grab the gavel. But it's wonderful to be with you both. And yes, the influence game and big money is at work. It's one of the reasons we call it Big Pharma.
Well, duly noted. So let's get into this MAHA report. So what is it exposing about the pharmaceutical drug companies? Let's start there.
Well, it exposes what Secretary Kennedy said in another forum. And by the way, let me just pause here and note all the talk about bipartisanship and nonpartisanship. Isn't it amazing that President Trump, who still speaks with kind of a New York state of mind, with what some would call rough edges, isn't it interesting that he's put together this coalition? I mean, can you imagine 18 months ago thinking that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would be part of the Trump administration? But as Secretary Kennedy pointed out, he said Big Pharma is spending so much dough, they could have a lobbyist devoted personally to all 435 members of the House, all 100 United States senators, and all 9 members of the United States Supreme Court. Here's what we know from the report. I'll leave the medical information to public health experts, but you asked about what's going on in terms of influence. We know that roughly over a 20-year period, and to be candid, beginning about the time I was still in Congress, on through 2019, Big Pharma doled out what? Something like 13 billion, with a B, for lobbying and efforts to influence. As I recall, just under what, 6 billion directly involved in dealing with political spending and spending on the Hill, I should say, lobbying and all of that. And then over that same close to 2-decade period, another big multi-billion-dollar expenditure for the creation of civic and political groups, a type of what some would consider grassroots, but were being financed by Big Pharma and its big money. And what I think is important, and this again is something that I think people may miss. No doubt, as I've been in the anchor chair at different places or on talk radio, we all look at election years. Last year, we called it the most polarizing election in our history. Well, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a poll that found that 89% of Republicans, 84% of Democrats, 78%, close to 80% of independents all believe that Big Pharma is more interested in profits really than public health. So when you have those kinds of numbers, the White House and Secretary Kennedy are working to make America healthy again, and that means directly confronting Big Pharma, because Americans are paying close to what, 3 times what our Canadian neighbors, what our British cousins, heck, what even people down under in the developed world are paying for their prescription drugs.
JD, I know that the Federal Trade Commission is also concerned with this difference in charging. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, Matt, as you point out, and this is something else, because I think you always hear getting down in the weeds can be dangerous, but here's what you need to know about the president's executive order about most favored nation status. When you strip it all away, it's to make America the most favored nation by saying to the other parts of the developed world, you guys need to pay your fair share. But of course, an executive order the president empowers executive agencies, including the Federal Trade Commission. And as we get together here, I guess it was now what, 8 days ago, the big conference involving Secretary Kennedy and President Trump and others involved in our nation's public health. It was pointed out on that same day, the Federal Trade Commission went to the pharmaceutical companies saying, look, we're wise to you in terms of what you are doing to delay the procedures within intellectual and property rights to actually keep drugs away from going to their generic status where they would be cheaper. So the FTC is taking a long look at untangling some of those legal tactics that delay the freeing of patents and intellectual property to let generics come to the market and thereby lower prices for Americans that much sooner.
So we see the MAHA movement. Everybody's getting behind it. It was part of the big coalition that got Donald Trump elected. You know how things work in Washington, D.C. So what do you want to see? What are the next steps here as we go through all of these budget negotiations that they're doing right now on the Hill? What do you want to see? What should people be looking for?
Well, obviously, the president's executive order is an incredibly encouraging first step. And the efforts by Secretary Kennedy and others to reform public health and basically say to Big Pharma, your days of ruling the roost are over. And understand, Big Pharma has had the run not only of Washington, D.C., but the pricing mechanisms. At the start of this year, we changed the calendar, and suddenly you saw massive increases in over 800 prescription drug medicines, often certainly outpacing the rate of inflation, as even as bad as it was in the final days of the Biden administration. So this entire movement is built on a grand coalition. And as the poll results I shared with you from the Kaiser Family Foundation in that polarized election year where everybody says we have to do something, I just recall, I guess it was Benjamin Disraeli, way back during his days as British Prime Minister. I must follow the people. After all, am I not their leader? And that's what President Trump and Secretary Kennedy are doing. They're saying, look at the groundswell and the true grassroots. The American people want to end Big Pharma's price increases. The American people are tired of paying, and this is just on average 3 times as much as our counterparts in the rest of the developed world. And so that is where it starts. And when that happens, as President Reagan famously said about those of us who served in the House, when members of Congress and the Senate feel the heat, they eventually see the light. And that's why I'd invite those who are watching us get together to check out the website, pharmareformalliance.com, because truly bipartisan pieces of legislation introduced in the House and in the Senate move to really enact the basic points of the president's executive order and continue with the theme that Secretary Kennedy advocates of making America healthy again. The bottom line is we got to put America first because Big Pharma thus far has put America last.
JD, it's a breath of fresh air. I mean, and like you say, this is a popular issue among all Americans for good reason. And I'm so tired of hearing strange free market arguments when this isn't a free market at all. But the one obstacle that you have is that the people are with this movement. They're with MAHA. But as you know, and you could see even in the response to the MAHA report, the Big Pharma has money and they are going to use it in this battle. So what do they, play that out for us because they're just starting, right, to attack.
Well, here is something that we need to note from the political campaigns of Donald Trump and from campaigns in which I was involved. Grassroots beats greenbacks every time. Now understand, on the Hill, there is great reluctance before really studying an issue and seeing where people stand, Matt. It's like the old joke of one of my counterparts from my native North Carolina on a controversial issue. He was asked, "Where do you stand, Congressman?" He said, "Well, some of my friends are for it and some of my friends are against it, and I'm going to side with my friends." What the American people have to do is say, look, it is a money issue, but not a money issue of political influence. It's what we're paying in terms of high drug prices, much more than what's being paid by other nations in the developed world, on average, 3 times as much. And even that kind of understates it for certain drugs. The American people have had it. That's why it's important they contact their member of Congress, their United States senator, and tell them, look, here's a chance to truly do something bipartisan. We're not going to abuse that term and have one side or the other use this. Matt, we're discovering this is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. It's an American issue. And given the level of support, I don't believe there is any way that Congress can turn its back on joining with the president and those who want to end the incredible inflation and big prices demanded by Big Pharma.
JD, give us that website one more time.
You betcha. PharmaReformAlliance.com.
We are all about making America healthy again. Thanks so much for your time.